Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're opening up the book of Numbers. We're going right into chapter 19.
Right. And this chapter, it lays out some, well, truly unique and pretty intricate ancient laws.
Yeah, all centered around ritual purification. It
Yeah.
seems especially focused on dealing with the intense uncleanness linked to death.
Exactly. It's a section full of, frankly, surprising details.
Mm-hmm.
Gives us a real window into a worldview very, very focused on purity.
It feels like more than just rules, though. It's like a whole system, isn't it?
It is. It's a system designed to manage this fundamental challenge.
Mm-hmm.
How does a community that's meant to be ritually pure, living right next to a holy space, deal with death, which, was seen as the ultimate ritual contamination?
So it demands some pretty extraordinary measures.
It really does.
Okay, let's jump into it. The text starts right off with something called the Ordinance of the Red Heifer, a command from the Lord to Moses and Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal with this red heifer? Why is it so central?
Well, the requirements are incredibly specific. It has to be a red heifer, obviously, but also without defect or blemish. So perfect condition, basically.
Perfect.
And here's a really crucial detail. It must never have been under a yoke.
Never under a yoke. That sounds significant.
It really is. It suggests this animal is set apart, completely untouched by common labor, by everyday use. It's sort of consecrated just by its nature and history.
Like it's reserved purely for this one single purpose.
Exactly. It elevates it way beyond just an ordinary animal. It's designated for this unique, powerful purification ritual.
Okay, so they find this very specific animal. What happens next? The ritual itself sounds pretty involved.
Oh, it is. The heifer is brought to Eleazar the priest, and then it's taken outside the camp.
Outside. Why outside?
Well, it seems to be about separating this intense process, dealing with death-related uncleanness, from the purity needed inside the camp near the sanctuary.
Makes sense. So outside the camp.
There, it's slaughtered, while Eleazar is watching, in his presence.
And the blood. It's used in a particular way, right?
Yes, very specific. Eleazar dips his finger in the blood and sprinkles it 7 times.
7 times.
Towards the front of the tent of meeting,
Mm-hmm.
symbolically directed towards, the divine presence. 7 often suggests completeness, a thorough action.
Right, like a perfected purification, and then the text says the whole animal is burned, not just parts.
The entire thing. While Eleazar watches, the whole heifer hide, flesh, blood, even the offal, everything goes into the fire.
Wow.
But wait, there's more. While it's burning, the priest throws in cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool.
Cedar, hyssop, scarlet wool, where have we seen those before?
They pop up in other purification rituals in the law. Adding them here seems to reinforce that this isn't just, getting rid of a carcass. It's a potent act of cleansing, specifically designed for this ultimate uncleanness.
Okay, so this incredibly intense ritual happens. What about the people involved? The priest, Eleazar, and the person who actually does the burning?
This is one of the most striking parts. Even though they're performing a purification ritual,
Yeah.
the act itself makes them ritually unclean.
Wait, really? How does that work?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The priest has to wash his clothes, bathe in water, and he's still considered unclean until evening.
And the guy who burns it?
Same exact thing. Wash clothes, bathe, unclean until evening.
That feels backwards. You do the purifying, and it makes you impure.
It does seem paradoxical, yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe think about it in terms of, ritual potency. The sacrifice, the substances, they carry this intense ritual charge, especially one meant to counteract death. So maybe those who handle it directly absorb some of that charge.
Like handling something highly radioactive in a ritual sense.
Kind of. It really highlights how contagious and powerful this specific type of uncleanness was seen to be. Even the purifiers need cleansing afterwards.
Okay, so the burning's done. The participants are dealing with their temporary uncleanness. What about the ashes? They're collected, right?
Yes, a man who is himself ceremonially clean gathers up these ashes.
They're not just swept away.
No. They're carefully collected and stored in a clean place, also outside the camp. And their purpose is absolutely critical.
Which is?
They are the key ingredient for making the water of cleansing. The text is explicit. The community keeps these ashes to use in this water for purification from sin, or specifically, this kind of uncleanness.
And let me guess, the man who just gathers the ashes.
He gets caught up in it too. Yep. Even just collecting the ashes from this potent ritual substance means he has to purify, wash his clothes, unclean until evening.
It really drives home that any contact with this whole process carries a ritual consequence.
It absolutely does. Every step matters.
And the text emphasizes this isn't just a one-off thing.
Definitely not. This whole procedure, the red heifer, the ashes, their use, it's declared a lasting ordinance.
Lasting, so permanent.
Permanent. It's not just for that moment in the wilderness. It's baked into the covenant laws, binding for Israelites and even non-Israelites living among them, generation after generation, foundational for maintaining communal purity.
All right, so the ashes are set aside, ready for this water of cleansing. Now, the chapter seems to pivot. It starts describing the situations that actually require this purification. What makes someone unclean in this context?
The main trigger is contact with death. Plain and simple.
Mhm.
Anyone who touches a dead body, any dead body, becomes unclean.
And for how long?
7 days. A full week.
That's quite a while. Does this uncleanness spread easily? Like beyond just direct touching?
Oh, yes. This is where the details show just how pervasive it was considered. If someone dies inside a tent,
Uh-huh.
then everyone who enters that tent afterwards, and everyone who was already inside when the death happened, they all become unclean for 7 days.
The whole tent essentially becomes a contaminated zone.
Pretty much. The entire enclosed space. And it extends to objects, too.
Objects? How so?
Any open container in that tent, anything without a lid fastened securely on it, that becomes unclean as well.
Wow, so it really permeates the environment.
It does. The uncleanness isn't just personal. It attaches to the space and the things within it.
What if the death happens outside or you encounter remains in the open?
The rules cover that too, just as specifically. If you're out in the field, say, and you touch someone who was killed violently,
Okay.
or someone who just died naturally, or even if you just touch a human bone or stumble upon a grave,
Any of those?
any of those acts make you unclean for 7 days. The connection to death, even indirectly through remains or a burial site, triggers this state of ritual impurity.
Okay. So you've become unclean one way or another. Now you need that water of cleansing made from the heifer ashes. How do they actually prepare it for use at that moment?
It's simple but potent, as you said.
Yeah.
They take some of those stored ashes, put them into a jar or vessel,
Right.
and then they pour fresh running water, often translated as living water, over them. It's not just mixing. It's like creating this active infusion of the purifying power from the ashes.
Living water. Okay. And then it's sprinkled.
Exactly. A man who is himself ceremonially clean takes hyssop.
That plant again.
Yeah, that small bushy plant used often for sprinkling and purification rites. He dips the hyssop into the water.
And
And then he sprinkles. He sprinkles the tent, if that was the source, and all the furnishings inside. He sprinkles the people who were contaminated by being in the tent.
And people who touched remains outside.
Them too. Anyone who touched a bone, a grave, someone killed, someone who died naturally, they all get sprinkled.
Is one round of sprinkling enough?
No, the timing is crucial. The unclean person has to be sprinkled on the 3rd day of their uncleanness,
Do 3.
and then again on the 7th day.
3rd day and 7th day. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens after that second sprinkling on day 7?
That's the final step in the ritual part. On that 7th day, after being sprinkled, the person also has to wash their clothes and bathe fully with water.
Right. Personal cleansing, too.
Exactly. And the text says that evening, once all that is done, they will finally be clean. It's a whole multi-stage process over a wick. Ritual sprinkling plus physical washing.
It sounds absolutely essential for getting back into a state of ritual purity. What if someone becomes unclean and just doesn't do it? Skips the water of cleansing?
The consequences are, well, incredibly severe within this system. The text is blunt. That person must be cut off from the community.
Cut off, like exiled.
That's how it reads. It's a complete removal from belonging. And the reason given is critical, because they have defiled the sanctuary of the Lord.
How does not purifying yourself defile the central sanctuary?
It's linked directly to not having the water of cleansing sprinkled on them. Their uncleanness remains, and by staying within the community in proximity to the holy place, they're seen as contaminating it, threatening its purity, and by extension, the purity of the whole community focused around it.
That really underscores how serious this uncleanness was considered. It wasn't just a personal issue.
Not at all. It had communal and sanctuary implications.
And there's that other fascinating, almost paradoxical detail about the water itself, isn't there? How uncleanness gets transferred.
This is maybe the most mind-bending part, I think.
Hmm.
It really hammers home this idea of transferable impurity. The man who does the sprinkling, remember, he has to be clean to start with.
Yeah.
Even he has to wash his clothes afterwards, just from performing the act of purification.
Okay, similar to the original ritual handlers, but it goes further, right?
It does. Anyone who simply touches the water of cleansing
Just touches the water.
becomes unclean until evening.
Wow. So the very thing designed to cleanse makes a clean person temporarily unclean just by contact.
Precisely. It's not just like soap and water. It's a ritually charged substance. It carries power.
And the chain reaction doesn't stop there.
No, the laws spell it out. Anything that an unclean person touches becomes unclean itself.
The object gets contaminated.
Right. And then anyone else who comes along and touches that object,
They become unclean too.
they also become unclean until evening.
So uncleanness isn't just a state you're in, it's like a contagion, a spiritual contagion that jumps from person to object and object back to person.
That is exactly the picture these rules paint. It spreads by contact, creating this ripple effect.
Which means purification isn't just about the original person.
No, you potentially have to track and purify everything and everyone down the line who came into contact, directly or indirectly. It requires incredible vigilance.
And like the red heifer ordinance, these rules about death, uncleanness, and the water, they're also called a lasting ordinance, right?
Yes, absolutely. Fundamental, enduring rules. Part of the very fabric of maintaining communal purity, especially with something as unavoidable as death always potentially present.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've really dug into Numbers 19 here. We saw this incredibly unique red heifer ritual, the specific animal, the burning, the added elements.
And a surprising twist where the people performing the purification become temporarily unclean themselves.
Right. Then the ashes, kept for the water of cleansing, and how that water is used to purify people, tents, objects, anything contaminated by contact with death, direct or indirect.
Following that strict third-day, seventh-day sprinkling schedule, plus washing.
And the severe consequence for not purifying being cut off, seen as defiling the sanctuary, which tells us so much about the perceived danger of this impurity.
And finally, that fascinating concept of the water itself being potent, transferring temporary uncleanness, and the whole chain reaction of contamination through touch.
It's the sheer level of detail, isn't it? And the worldview it reveals.
Right.
Purity wasn't abstract. It was this tangible state needing constant, meticulous management.
And death was seen as this fundamental opposite to the sacred, requiring this incredibly specific, powerful countermeasure. The whole system tracks contamination meticulously.
It really does shed light on a perspective where ritual purity was just central to everything: community life, belonging, relationship with the divine. It demanded constant awareness and these sometimes quite counterintuitive procedures.
It certainly makes you think about how different cultures and times have conceived of impurity, holiness, and the boundaries needed between them.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We've talked a lot about this chain of contact, how touching an unclean person or thing makes you unclean. What does this intense focus on the ripple effect tell us about how interconnected this ancient community saw itself?
And related to that, consider the complexity of the purification itself. What does that suggest about the immense effort, maybe not just individual effort, but communal effort, required to constantly maintain collective purity in the face of something as certain and unavoidable as death? Something to think about.